Today's show is going to deal with some new concept. Well, not some new concepts. Deal with some realities that we're looking at right now, and how that's affecting the game sphere. And I've actually sort of pointed out I've micro scripted this show, and sadly, like, this is the third time I've tried recording it, and every time I try recording, something happens. So hopefully, this will work. All right. So first off, is I got to be honest. The current reality that we're dealing with is a dependency on four actions in a 300-point game. And I'm starting to see the outpacing that is actually occurring. A couple of years ago, I think it's a year ago, when leadership changed, there was something that PJ Bolin said to me, and it was leadership needs to be on every team. And I sort of looked at him. I was like, it's good, but I don't know if it's that good. And he sort of explained it to me, is that eventually a person has four actions per turn versus a person that has three actions per turn. You're just able to do a lot more, and it's going to end up just substantially being in your favor. And so I've sort of expanded that thought a little bit. Between autonomous and actions do not count against your action total, that having the ability to do at least four actions per turn, is like mandatory now. It just is. Whether you're using leadership, four actions plus. So whether you're using leadership or you're using Power Woman or some other game effect like Wasp from ADW that potentially can give you, additional actions. So to have five actions in a turn if you roll leadership. Stuff like that I think is going to be more and more essential. I also think characters like Eric Masterson, or characters that have the ability to take away one action per turn, is also going to be a lot stronger. So I wish we had the ability to debuff actions down to a base 2. So if you invest in it, your opponent would have a minimum 2 actions per turn. You could say is a minimum. Your minimum would be minus 1 action per 100 points, something like that. So if I have 2 characters that lower your actions down, you would still get 2 actions in a 300-point game. But if you had a leadership, you would still only get 2 actions instead of 3. So I think that would be this is a really interesting observation. I've noticed it in the last couple of weeks of competitive play that I've had, that a lot more importance, definitely on on non-theme teams. Like, the importance of leadership is essential. Like, Groot being 20 points is a huge boon for everybody, from an action perspective and from a threat perspective. So it almost seems foolish, if you're not running a theme team, to not run Groot, unless there's other complex things that you're weighing. Which is like starting area, which can screw you if you're not looking at it properly. So overall, I really do like the whole concept of having 4 actions, but I also am understanding the limitations of 4 actions as well, because I know we will always want more and more and more actions. But I think this sort of hunger for 4 actions will eventually lead us down a path where we're looking at more characters like Power Woman. And I think there's some useful insights that we can be gained from there being a standard of 4 actions in a 300-point game. But I also think that at the same time, we need to ask ourselves, is this not necessarily is this good for the meta, but when I'm fighting somebody, what type of options does that open up if my opponent can get one more action on me per turn, or how many options can I open up if hypothetically I have 4 actions? And so that leads us into sort of the next topic with equipment. And equipment it has been a essential part of heroclix since the Mighty Thor, with Mjolnir and Thunderstrike and Stormbreaker and all those. But we've seen some other equipment that stand out since then, not just the exospecs, but also the symbiote, Joker gas canister, and there's a few others. So when we're looking at equipment right now, I think one of the biggest things with equipment we are admitting is equipment is low costed, solving minute problems that we didn't know we had, or better yet, we knew we were sort of aware that we had since we didn't have resources. And instead of just saying everyone has this protection or everyone has this buff, we are, dissecting it out and making it closer to approximately what it should cost. I'm not saying it's the exact 1-to-1 ratio of what it should cost, but it's closer. So when we start to understand that, we could come to a couple of interesting conclusions. At least from, I wouldn't say from a game design perspective, but at least from an internal perspective of looking at what people are playing. Number one, we like shape change. So the ability to use the symbiote, whether it's either the indestructible one or the destructible one, is a huge element that everybody is looking at, mainly for survivability. Yes, there is Battle Fury out there. Yes, there is Outwit out there. But we really want to have that option of shape change. And I think that makes us sort of scratch our heads just a little bit and take some steps back, because most of the time people will think that shape change is a power that is more of a defensive luxury, and that's something that high-end figures want to equip onto themselves. Whereas what we need to look at is shape change is a deterrent to your opponent attacking a key figure in your army. And so when you look at it like that, then you can see that a lot of people want to put up massive deterrents for their major pieces, whether it's their tent poles or their key support, or last but not least, the one figure that does that exclusive mechanic that no other figure does. I think that when we start looking at how we are breaking down our points and how we're looking at our options, that we like shape change. And I think the other thing that's quite clear with equipment is people want to be able to modify and specialize damage. So exospecs are one thing, Mjolnir is another. But when we start looking at some of our other options like Goblin Glider and how many people are actually actively looking at Goblin Glider, then we can see, like, look, people want to give move and attack to characters that couldn't use move and attack. Or if you had running shot, now you have hypersonic speed, and opening up options that really weren't there before and maybe weren't expected to be there before. Expected to be there. So equipment in and of itself is doing a lot for us. I think the question comes in, for us right now is, how are we developing equipment? How are we looking at equipment? And where's that pushing our understanding of what's viable in the game? which leads us to sort of the compound problem between having 4 actions and having a more dependence on equipment, which is the single equip on turn 1 versus the double equip on turn 1. Now, there are a couple of different conversations I've been privy to sort of sit in on or read through, and it goes like this. Single equip costs you 2 actions unless you have some magical way of doing 2 TKs in 1 turn. Okay? So, excuse me. So functionally, by having a double equip, is going to cost you on average 4 actions, whether you're going over there and picking it up or not. It's going to cost you 4 actions. Now, you could have a light object, and then you can have a character that is autonomous, go over, pick up a light object, sidestep, shimmy, and then drop the object next to whoever they need to drop it next to. And that's completely possible. But if you're not doing that method, functionally, you're going to be spending 4 actions. Now, the consequences of doing 4 actions, mind you, is overall, you're going to have to just accept what's coming. If your opponent is also, if you're going first, it's a lot safer to double equip. If you're going second, it is hella risky to double equip because your opponent can just be on top of you on turn 2 and just ready to rock you if you're not prepared. Definitely if your opponent doesn't have any equipment, is just deployed out first turn. There is very little that you can do to really deter your opponent from doing that. And I know some folks will say, well, hey, I really like the double equip. It allows me to make sure that on turn 3 that I'm way stronger than I would have been. And that's fine. But as long as you recognize that your turn 2, you are hoping to clear at best, and at worst, you're pushing to defend. And so that can functionally take 2 very important characters off the map, figuratively speaking. And if I'm able to take 2 very strong characters sort of out of play, then it's easy for me to mount a better offense against my opponent. So the double equip is primarily a byproduct of leadership being so predominant in team builds, because other than that, that's the only way you're able to double equip. But if we take out leadership in leadership in builds, we see how really risky 1 equip is, because you're functionally sending out a character to the location, TKing, and they're equipping in that same turn. You have 1 more action to set up to deal with whatever else your opponent's going to do for the next turn. And that is the point where it becomes evident why leadership is becoming more and more dominant, is that those first few turns are really, really crucial, and you need to pack a lot in those first few turns because there's a lot of action going on in those first few turns. Okay. So that sort of wraps that up just slightly. So next we have what I like to call the Ghostbuster problem. So it goes like this. So anybody that's watched Ghostbusters or the Ghostbuster cartoons and the Ghostbuster TV shows and all the fun Ghostbuster stuff, I think they had 2 cartoons. They had Ghostbusters and Extreme Ghostbusters, or they just had Extreme Ghostbusters. I forgot, but I like both of them. But it's inevitable that always happens in Ghostbusters. So they have the big, huge place where they put the ghost in, and it's you sort of look at it like it's a 10-pound bag. The bag can hold 10 pounds of stuff, and eventually they catch more than 10 pounds of ghost, and then the machine bursts or there's like a power outage or whatever, and all the ghosts that they caught are just like all over the place, and they're flying all over New York causing problems and havoc and all this other stuff. Okay, so in the same situation with Pogs, we have the Ghostbuster trap problem. How are you keeping them under control? How are you going to limit them coming onto the scene? How are you like just blasting them? Because I know some people will say like, look, you're just screwed if you face Hawkeye. Pogs are okay. I would make the argument that just because one character, or even you could say our, what is it, Vulture Prime or whatever it is, can solve that problem, doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a problem. What it more means is that there are counters in the game state that people may choose. But if you don't choose those options, like what else can you do? Now, automatically I would say like you better have Pulse Wave. So you could try to get, 2 or 3 of them off the map at once. But that also limits you from really playing the similar mechanic back, because you're bound to get some of your time investment in those sort of pulse waves. Plus, you have to get Colossal Retaliators off the field, because if not, once you've killed 0-point Pogs, you will get retaled with a vengeance of, 30 Thors. So that's a functional problem that we have to look at. Now, I think that, the characters like Dawnbreaker that's coming, I really think that once Dawnbreaker comes, the age of Pogs will come to a very quick end. Mainly just because Dawnbreaker is a good piece. That's one. And number 2 is there is not a Pog generator that can just generate a win condition on their own. Every Pog generator that I've seen that's in the game right now has to play nice with 2 to 3 other mechanics. Okay? If they don't play nice with 2 to 3 other mechanics, then they are going to lose. Like that's just the honest truth. So we can come back and we can say like, well, what about Isaac? Isn't Isaac, OP as all get out? Like, come on, darklogos. You can't, just overlook Isaac. And I can say Isaac is good. I think my biggest problem with Isaac right now is that the most teams that he works well with, you still have to have a very high level of understanding of the game. Like, it's not just crap out Pogs and win. Like, you do have to understand the game really well, of knowing why you're calling out Lord Gaia versus Starax or whoever the guy is. Everyone just focuses on Lord Chaos, the fact that he's, autonomous. And they completely overlook the value of Lord Gaia and how much he helps you, just control games. But I think that's just also some of the short-sightedness from people. So, yeah. So all in all, I think we are going to see potentially more elements that just make playing Pogs more difficult. Or at least not as one-sided as they are now. And I think that's a good thing. But in the end, I think the current state of Pogs is that they're really good in the short term. And it's something for, I think, everybody to look at. So let's go ahead and talk about like IDs real quickly and the state of IDs. I think the state of IDs, more than what a lot of people would like to say, is in a really good place. And the main reason that I say it's in a really good place is there are enough game elements in play to make you hesitant on when to play IDs. Now, great players will always get stuff off the map, and so that's an issue. But like I said, Sheriff Strange is a great piece to play. And having played him in 2 major tournaments, I could actually see how much he impacts the game. So, if looking at a couple of events that I've played, I think there's some lessons that I've definitely learned from playing against Pogs. And definitely, I mean, not Pogs, ID cards. Definitely in Tulsa playing against Caleb Riddick, who won that event. And he ended up using the Earth X Captain Marvel to really good avail with Exospecs and then with 2 Unseens. And by having the Unseens call in IDs, they would be double tokened. And so that's where I say like Sheriff Strange would come in. So it would make it so that that Unseen has to be in hindering terrain when it calls in an ID, which makes it to, in some situations a little bit tough for the Unseen to get around. Because either you're going to have the second Unseen sort of doing its smoke cloud thing to keep the first Unseen safe, or you're trying to like maneuver with your Colossals to pick up your Unseens and try to keep them safe in that way. But sort of looking back at it being balanced, or at least looking at it as a valid tactic situation, what Caleb ended up doing was quite interesting. And I have the recording of the final game plus like my interview with him. So as soon as I become a bit more of a responsible adult, I will put that up on the channel. But functionally, he calls in with the Unseens, but he has 3 probs and 2 outwits. And I'm not going to say it guarantees that you're going to hit, but it increases the chances of you to hit. And when you're looking at just like packing the muscle and having what I would say a very good, or you can even argue uber support, that is highly survivable and plus has a lot of good, the best way I could put it is, support powers. It shows that like maybe we need to like reevaluate how we're actually playing. I think definitely with playing with IDs, with a lot of them being so cheap and just packing a lot of punch, and we're not really spending more than 60 points for a good chunk of them. Why aren't we seeing like a third to almost a half of our team being these very hard to kill buffer negators, control piece characters, while our main character, our main attacker on the force, just goes gung-ho. Now, I mean, you can make the argument that Captain Marvel could be a better figure, but I would argue it's like, Captain Marvel is not bad and actually works better than a lot of people may think. So there is that. I think the other element that we also have to sort of come back and look at IDs are, as they are right now, everything that packs a punch, and I mean like literally like 4 or 5, 4 damage, you have to spend 150 points or more to summon them in. Everything else is like base 3 damage unless you get lucky with Wolverine with Blaze Claws, Fangs, and Flurries. So all in all, most of the IDs are not doing a lot of base damage. They easily can get modified up, like Chase Cyclops can get modified up. But other than that, most of your standard characters that you're bringing in to help you out with your IDs aren't like Nick Fury, where I'm taking away your defense plus blasting you for 4 damage, and like I'm getting enhanced up, so eat 6, son. It's not as easy, I feel, for that to happen. So I think IDs are in a good place. I think the question is for going forward is, should we take time to reevaluate how we're using IDs, or better yet to say, are we just still thinking of IDs in the same way that we were thinking about them before? Have we not really developed how we're using IDs? Is it just call in a nuke and go? Is there anything else that we can do with IDs? I like calling in Miss Marvel for a TK, so I don't have to pack the TK. So burning the 3 points for Miss Marvel is worth it. Are there any other things like that where it's just like that one turn I do this one thing, and then that fixes all my situations. So let's go ahead and move on, and let's talk about cheap equipment and consolation map bonuses. Well, we already talked about cheap equipment, so never mind. So again, this is what happens when I sort of plan out a show. Let's talk about consolations, map bonuses. Right now, I've sort of ranted, and I've stated that I do not like uh, the map bonuses. Uh, Realistically, and I think some of it is way too cheap for what it does, and so I'm I'm sort of put back because part of me says to myself, look, if you're going to get um, a severe bonus for 5 points that is that strong, then there has to be some more stuff like tailored onto it. Or your cost needs to be adjusted. So I would prefer like the future map bonuses be a little bit more expensive and evaluated probably a little bit better. For example, me paying 5 points for Crimson Sage is really undercosted when I'm paying 15 points for what's his name, any of the Super Apes or Justice League Apes or any of the Serpent Society Pogs. Okay, so we have a distinct problem where it's not balancing out in terms of like just overall value. And you can make the argument, hey, if I get the map bonus and then I have an Iron Man and then this, that, and the other, and I may or may not be able to get this and whatever else. And I'll just be honest. If during a game I'm able to summon 2 Pogs the entire game, okay, and they don't even have to be out at the same time, for 5 points, it's worth it. But it gets more interesting when we start looking at, for example, the Earth X Wakanda, where you functionally have a second chance at life with your Super Senses roll. And for, Cosmic Black Panther, that just makes him, 5 kinds of wonderful. And when we take our like 4,000 feet view at the situation, being able to reroll Blaze Claw's Fangs, being able to reroll Super Senses, and then potentially just say you have protected Super Senses and Blades, if you're on that map, is a very strong bonus to deal with. And so you start you start adding on your 4 through 6 Super Senses rolls, and now they're protected from Outwit. And on top of everything else, you have a chance to re-roll them. That can stack up to be strong really, really fast. So I think the costing needs to be evaluated. But when we're starting to build teams, we need to start looking at these map bonuses more, not just if we're going to play on it, but also the constellation, and does the constellation work for what we're doing. And I would argue that if you're working towards having constellation, definitely don't try to double equip. Don't try to double equip. And then make sure your team can function on or off your main map that you're picking for your map bonus. Because if your team doesn't work on the map in which you're getting the map bonus, inevitably you will win map. And so you have to deal with the consequences therein. And when you do, you're stuck. You're stuck asking some very solid questions like, okay, if I pick another map, then I won't get my map bonus, which means my team is now, ice skating uphill in a hurricane. That doesn't make ice skating uphill in a blizzard. That makes more sense. Okay, it's just too hard. Whereas if you can look at your team and say, like, I can do this map, I work on my constellation map, and this is how I'm going to operate on my main map that I picked. And if I lose every other map, I know how I'm navigating because this constellation bonus is solving this specific problem for me. So I think it's going to get more and more interesting with every new map that comes out. I think that WizKids is creating an interesting situation for us where they're giving us more options, and I don't mind it. I think that we need to actually have another conversation with WizKids about, hey, maybe you need to reevaluate the cost of maps. That's just my thought right now. So that's today's show. I know it's not as long as you would want it. You probably like got half a show, man. What's up with that? Yeah, I know it's half a show, but that's all I really could do this week, and I'm trying to get ready for estates and other family stuff. And my nephew's birthday is coming up here soon, so. And I got some other cool show stuff to get done for you all. So, yeah. All right. That's it. And thanks for listening. You can follow me on... Oh, gosh. This is bad when you forget your own outro you've done for years. All right. You can follow me on Twitter at StartOverPod. It came from outer space and told me, man... When's the last time we had the dimensional scanner? I need to go find that. I haven't worked on it for a while. So yeah, I think my Twitter's going to bring me back my dimensional scanner. So if not, if I can't get it working in the next few days, I'm pretty sure that it can find one from Dimension 89L. I think it could. Or either Dimension DH, what was it? DH4C. DH4C. I'm pretty sure I could get it from DH4C. So, yeah. You can email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. If you wish to opine, keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it awesome, baby. Tell me what you think about the current state of the heroclix gamescape. Also, you can donate to the show at startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com. And if you would like to hire me as a coach, I do $15 lessons and $5 games. So, yeah, that's it. I will check you later. And remember, we all have to start over somewhere.